Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 6 and the finale of my 3D printed 2001 Clavius dome base with a little Belfine Ares 1B in my 3D printed moon buses. Very happy with how this came out. So I was right down to the wire, and I had mentioned, I believe I had mentioned in previous video, but if I haven't, I'm mentioning it now. I found out about a week or so ago that there is an IPMS convention down in Kentucky, Louisville, which I didn't know they had one there. So I'm planning to attend it. It's on Saturday the 16th, I believe, whatever that Saturday falls on, 16th or 17th. So I'm just going to go down for one day. It's only a one-day event, and get it entered. So I'm down to the wire and finishing up the model of the rest of it and getting everything all together. So it's definitely lit a fire under me to get it completed and be able to take it down there and enter it in that contest as well. So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so I'm beginning work on the interior of the Belfine Ares. So as I showed, I hollowed it out. Well, I didn't hollow it out. I cut the bottom out, it was already hollow. But I cut out all the windows. So I cut out the cockpit windows. And once I'm satisfied with how they look, I'm gonna paint some black inside the part that I cut. And this is really easy to work with. It's just like your regular ABS plastic. It's really nicely done. But all the windows have like a black border around them anyway, even on the top. So I'll just dab on some black paint to finish up the areas that I scratched or scraped away, especially on the inside of these passenger windows. So what I'm starting with is the cockpit. So just like I did with the astronauts, I took my seated pilot figures, and those are the only ones I'm going to work with. The other ones are just, the standing stewardesses were just way too hard to print, and so was the seated one. So at this scale, it would be impossible to get any to succeed. So what I did was I went in and I put the pilots in various little poses. These are the ones I used in the large size, the large scale Ares. So I reduced these down to 15, 20, 25, and 30% of the files that worked in the larger 148 scale model. So I went ahead and put some white paint on them. Several of them you had like one of the pilot's heads didn't fully form. So these came together on the build plate. So I printed them that way. So what I did was I ended up settling on these two. The one on the left on this one seems to be successful, and the one on the right on this one. So I'm going to leave them on the supports. I'm not taking them off supports, mainly because all you're going to see is the barest image of them as white. Maybe I'm going to have to try really difficultly to put on some tiny little black as the seat belts, and a little bit of dark brown on their head for their hair. But that's going to be it. And again, this cockpit's going to be red, but I do want to see something in there, just barely, so you can make out in there. And I cut out this little piece of styrene that's going to start to be like the cockpit back. Again, no real detail in that. What I'll end up doing is painting some black behind them to represent their seats. And we'll see if I want to try to make look like there's something behind them barely, but I don't have a ton of room anyway to work with, but I just want to be given the merest of detail. So what I want to try to do is gingerly cut these in half, so I can just have, well, trim them down so they're just sitting on that support, which will kind of become their seat that they're sitting in. And then I'll kind of work from there. So, all right. All right, so after I glued the astronauts, let me turn this over. After I glued the two parts of the astronauts together, still attached to their supports, as you can see there. I glued a piece of styrene down the center to hold them together. Then there's two black lines on either side of them. I glued down some styrene strip that I painted black, just to give it the idea of their black seats. And then I just put some other framework around it, as you can see, with a rounded edge to be able to fit into the ship. So you're not going to see a ton of detail, other than you're going to see that something's there. And you're going to make out the outline of the little astronauts, and you're going to make out their white suits and that sort of thing. So I glued, I believe it's a nano red SMD in the bottom. Just drilled a little hole through that with a pin vise, and put it in with a 5-minute epoxy. And that's really all I'm going to have for the cockpit. There isn't going to be anything else behind it, but it's going to give it some depth, and it's also going to allow you to see something's in there, and it's going to let your eye believe that these are astronauts because of you can tell their figures and that sort of thing. So let me put a battery on that and show you what that's going to look like, and then we'll look at that inside the ship. All right, there we go. Now the red kind of fades out in the camera. It's actually really the proper red, and it looks really cool. Outside of the ship, you can see kind of a hot spot, but it's not really, and it looks kind of a yellow, but it's not yellow at all. So what I want to do is get some black on the back of this to mask it, and then I'll go ahead and be able to put that in the ship, and that'll complete the cockpit. So, all right. All right, so now I'm working on the passenger section, the lights for it anyway. It's not going to have any major passenger section because all you're going to see is through these little windows here. And I'm going to paint those black as well, just like I did on the top, so it'll look like a natural border around the window. I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do about a clear window, but I'll figure something out. I have some really thin clear styrene, but I'll just have to be careful with how I put it in, maybe with a little bit of canopy glue, that kind of thing, so it doesn't craze the window. So what I want to try to do is probably just a ring like this. So the way I made this, as I showed in my previous stills, is I used my vinyl cutter. Well, let me back up a second. So I also showed a still of some tape that I had down here on my cutting board. And the way I had come up with that is that the larger Aries from Stargazer has a clear vacuum form sealing part with the windows. So what I was doing when I was still working with the Stargazer for this version, and I'll still do it in the future, is instead of trying to work with this, which is harder to work with, what I was doing is I put some tape around the inner ring, or the outer ring, and tape around the inner ring. And then I traced out the little openings, little squares there for the lights. And then I peeled it off and I stuck it down flat onto the cutting board, and there was a little gap in it. So that's why you see that little gap right there. Because when you cut the tape and you flatten it out, it's a curved thing, obviously. It gives you that shape. So then when you glue them back together, you come up with this concave looking shape once again, just like this here. So all I did was I took a picture of that. I put it into the software for my Silhouette vinyl cutter, and I just used the tools there to make a circle and put a bunch of little squares in it that I could cut out. Now, this is UV resistant vinyl. So basically it's light blocking. Light doesn't go through it, so I don't have to worry about painting it to light block it. Sorry, that's a bright light. You can just see right there. But it's going to do light blocking for me. So as long as I seal around the edges of it and around the inside of it, I can put some lights on top of it and have them shine down through. So what I'm thinking of doing is taking some of the thin styrene sheet that I have, that's the real super thin, and I think it's about the same thickness as this, really. Maybe just a little. It's very close. It's very close to the thickness. So after I cut out the shape of my vinyl cutter, I peeled it out, got all the little squares out, and then I glued the edges together. It was just a little big for the inside of this, so I snipped off the other side and I just glued it together so there's a little bit of overlap on either side. And then what I did was on the inside of this, you can see that piece of styrene strip that I glued down. And there was like a natural little lip right there inside. You can kind of see it right there. There's a natural little edge. So I glue it down to that. And then what will happen is this will just go down inside and rest on top of it. It's kind of hard to do this with one hand. Okay. Hold on a second and I'll show you. There you go. So that's all those. So yeah, so if I stick these all down inside around there, that's going to be plenty of light. And again, they won't be stuck down inside. They'll be epoxied onto the top of this over each of those little squares. Well, at least 12 of them. 2 of them I'll just leave unlit. So I'll start with one, obviously. Maybe skip one, glue another one down, just keep gluing them until I get it all the way around. And I can have that pretty well compacted along the edge of this. And then I can just have one set of wires coming off of it. So, all right. All right, so I was working pretty heavily on this, so I decided to take a break and film some of it so I can show you the progress that I made. So I did cut out that styrene, thin styrene paper-like piece there and glue it onto the top so that you can see that light will come through. And I took another one of the ones that I printed out, you can see there, and I cut it shorter and bent it in and made some stuff in the middle. And I do understand that this is wrong. I just realized that after I did it. But those lights right there should not be on the outside of this. They should be on the inside. I don't really care. It's not, you're not going to see it. If you can see anything, you're simply going to make out those little bit of lights. And the light's going to come through them, of course, those little light panels. So I don't really care about any of the detail. I'm not putting any ridges or anything like that. I did forget to paint this gray before I put the white on, so I didn't want to go back and do that. But what I did was I just took some Tamiya weathering powders, gray, and I just brushed it over it. So it gives it sort of a lighter shading. It also dulls down a little bit, some of those glue marks that you can see, the powder did not want to stick on the glue marks. So, but again, I'm not worried about it. You're just going to see it being dark and you're going to see the lights. That's the main part. So for now, this piece is done. Now I did go ahead and put a strip of styrene around the edge of it, because what I'm going by is how well it fits inside of this. It's got to go down far enough, but not too far. So one other thing I made is I took some styrene strip, round stock, and I glued 3 of them together. And then I curved them and I glued them together to make a ring. And then I just took some thin styrene strip and just put those little lines all around it. So this is the yellow walls. So what I'm trying to achieve here, you're not going to see any massive detail looking through these little windows. But what you will see is the contrast between the dark, the yellow, which these will be the seats. And obviously I've decided to go ahead and modify as much of the whole passenger that I can, for the primary reason that when you look through, you can see all the way through to the other side. So if something was in the way and I tried to make it look right, it wouldn't come out. So in the end, I'm getting the main brush strokes, the broad strokes of the interior. But I'm not going to have, obviously, super detailed in that regard. Just like with the cockpit. When you look in, you see that there are some figures, you see some different colors that your eye recognizes as the cockpit, with the red and the white astronauts and the black. That's all you're going to see. Same thing. You're going to see the dark, you're going to see the yellow, you're going to see lights. I'm going to have like one little figure seated, same pilot figures. That's going to be seated in a chair. So I went ahead and I cut out a part for the floor, and I got a hole drilled into it. All I'm going to do for this is do the similar kind of thing and take a piece of thin styrene, curve it around to make that little part that goes down inside, and have a tube in the middle that's going to represent the elevator. So the biggest thing is you're just going to catch all the colors that you would normally see, just like I did on my larger one. But as far as if you could get a tiny camera and look inside, you would tell that it does not look like the passenger section, but it's going to be pretty darn close. And the same thing, I can reproduce this type of ring on the inside of this for the lower parts of this. And then all I'm going to do is paint black in between the windows. I'm not going to put any bathrooms, obviously, anything like that. So, all right. One other thing I want to try to do is, I think it would be cool. This is going to be removable. It has to be, since I'm going to have the battery down inside of this bottom part. So what I'm thinking about doing to get a little more, visibility on some of this interior, because this looks pretty cool inside of this. And this is down inside. It looks kind of reminiscent of the larger Mobius version when you take the roof off. Pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to glue this onto the top. All the lights are going to be independently in the top. Pretty much just like the one in the Mobius is, with a wire coming down that goes down and hits the battery. So what I'm thinking of doing is having this held on with magnets, so that the wires and things that I'm cramming down in there aren't going to press it up, because I need this to be able to close completely and not come off on me. So what I can do is have this whole part on the bottom, including the yellow rings around it, and I'm just going to do some basic seating things. I'm going to come up with a little pattern of maybe a little square stock piece, put on some other little pieces of square stock to imitate chairs, and just make all those ones that go around it. Paint those yellow, paint this dark gray, and then that'll just accommodate the colors that your eyes normally used to seeing. So, all right, but coming along really well. I should be able to get this completed here shortly. And then I just have to get the lights once I get this all hashed out, I can go ahead and get the lights attached up here. And I can go ahead and I'll have I think I'll have the elevator part glued to the bottom. That way I can grab onto it and pull it out. Because this part you're not going to take out. Once that's up in the top, it's not coming loose. It's going to be pretty snug. So, all right. All right, so I'm working on the passenger section floor. So I have this disc that I cut out, and I made sure that it fit down inside and rests on top of these little nubs here for the landing gear. So it's not quite perfectly where it needs to be necessarily, but what it will be is once I get something around the edge of it, like this, another piece like this, it will be fine. It'll be in the right place. So it'll be a little bit of overlap, and that's fine. Now what I did was I cut a hole out of the center, as you can see, and I used my square needle file just to ridge out those little places where the step would be. So I was trying to think of a way to put something, you know, obviously the elevator is going to be there. That was pretty easy. I just used a piece of styrene tube, a little piece of styrene sheet on the bottom. That's my elevator. I'm not putting any other detail. It'll just be painted black. But what I ended up coming up with in order to get that little part that sinks down in is I save every little thing I find, throw it in a little box just in case I ever need it. This is a piece from a medicine, a prescription thing that I get, and it's just a cover on top of something. And I have a bunch of these because I've been using this medication for a few years. So I checked it out, and I realized that little beveled part right there is the perfect size. So I just used my cutting wheel to cut it off, and I ended up with this, which is perfect. It actually fits right inside that. So when I glue it in place, I can glue this down inside of it, and that'll be my beveled part. And I'm also, again, not worried whatsoever about any kind of lines or anything else. Once I get this in there, I'm going to put some thin styrene strip just to kind of mimic some stairs. All right, so that worked out really well. I even used another one of those to put the piece on the top, just to kind of make it look finished. I tested it inside with the roof in. I don't think they touch, but you're not going to be able to tell that they don't, since there's that recessed part that goes up into here, which you would never see. You're barely going to see most of it. But so as long as I can put them in and close it up and they don't actually touch, that's all that matters. It'll give the look of it. And once I get it painted, obviously this is going to be dark gray. This, once I get the seats done, they're going to be the pale yellow. This part will be black, and then the floor, I still have to put some little stripping in for the seat, for the stairs, to look like there's stairs, but there won't be any, and paint that white. But let me go ahead and work on the seats first before I get this glued in, because I think that'll be easier to work with that way. All right, there we go. So you can see it's an indentation. It gives the impression of a seat inside plus the two arms. All right, so now what I'm going to do is put it down, and I'm going to just cut it off flat so it looks like this one here, and then glue it onto that one next to it. So let me do that. So that's what the final seat looks like. Now, very close up, it's not much to look at, but I'm just going to use a little bit of my Plastrec Bondine, pick it up, stick it down on there, and glue it in place. Let me do that, and then I'll show you all these finished. All right, there we go. So certainly if you look close up, they're clearly not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but from a distance, it'll give you that impression, especially when I get a coat of gray. And I decided to glue them down first before painting anything. So I'll just paint the whole thing gray. Then I'll go ahead and paint the chairs yellow, yellowish, pale yellow. And where's my elevator? There it is. Okay. And then my elevator goes in the center. And all I'm going to do to those little notches for stairs is just put a thin piece of styrene coming down. I'm not worrying about putting actual stairs in it because you're not going to see it. So, all right, let me get that glued in place, and then we'll start looking at some painting here. All right, so I finished all of the observation rooms to go on the interior and the back walls for the dome base, Clavius dome base. I decided just to go with 2 ones that are lit, just to be a little less of a hassle. I made 6 other ones that are just all the same, and I kind of changed up the design a bit from my original thing. The inside part doesn't really matter about the size as long as it goes inside. It's going to be flush, but the part that's supposed to be the window is a little overgrown, so it just goes snug up against it. And then those are all the same size, and I went back and redid these as well. So I get both of these wired with lights. Let me go ahead and put one up to a battery and show you what that's going to look like. Right, there you go. And it's brighter in the camera than it is in real life. I just used a, I believe it's a Pico or Pica maybe. No, I'm sorry, I take it back. It's a warm white Z LED on both of them because I had some warm whites. And I still went and dabbed a little bit of yellow on them just to make it even more in the warm range, to be a little dimmer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint these ones with some Tamiya smoke. I want to airbrush it on to get a nice even coating, so they look darker. And I might even put a light coat over this just to kind of dim that down just a little bit more. But again, you can see some little figures in there. And I also put a little piece of plastic in front of the SMD. I'm going to paint that black, by the way. It doesn't really have to be masked, but I just want to, keep that from bleeding through on the bottom, like you can see right there. But we'll see. I might put a light coat of that on there because it'll still shine through. It'll just be dimmer. So, all right. All right, so after I got the Tamiya smoke airbrushed onto all of the observation rooms, including a little bit on the ones that are lighted, I got those glued in place and wired up. I also glued the landing pad in place. Got everything wired up in the back with a battery pack. Then, of course, as you can see, I went ahead and glued on the dome pieces since I'm done with those interior parts. And I used I made a little template for myself out of this balsa wood piece, so I could make sure that the tips of these, the height is all the same. And basically what I've done with it is this flat edge here goes down on there, and then when I just, slide it over, it lines up with that. Like that. Just make sure that the top of it is just barely touching this. That's just a slight bit away from it, but same thing all the way around. And I did 2 at a time. I used 15-minute epoxy to give myself plenty of working time. Some of them I had to sand down the edge a little bit to make them a little lower. They were sitting too high. Other ones I had to actually groove out a groove that would rest on this back of this edge, which is one of the points I glued it. So it glued along the edge where it meets it, and then of course in that groove where it sits down inside. And one of them up here, I had to actually put some styrene on the back edge of this to build it up just a little bit because it was down too low. So it really had to do with how the grooves kind of came out in this outer ring. Some of those weren't quite as smooth and in the way they ought to be. I had to clean them up a bit, but looking fantastic. Everything's nice and lined up. The dome looks really awesome in that open position. So let me go ahead and turn on the lights and I'll show you how that looks at this point. And this is all completed. So at this point I just have to finish up the Aries, which is going to go on a post, and that'll wrap up this build. But let me go ahead and turn those lights on and show you how that's going to look. All right, there we go. So there's the landing pad with all the lights on it. And it's actually more of a warm white in real life. Looks a little cool white. There's the observation rooms, and you can see them nicely. If you just look a little bit, you can see the other ones that are just dark because I sprayed a Tamiya smoke on them, like that one there. So that looks cool. It looks like a window. It just looks like it's darkened, which I think that turned out really well. So I only have the two lit up as I showed, so you can see them in there pretty good. And you can make out that some little people in them. Looks pretty cool. And I think the lighting is perfect. Putting that little bit of Tamiya smoke over top of it just brought it down to just the right look, just the right brightness, so it doesn't look overpowering and blasting you with light. But fantastic. So as I said, this is all complete now. I'm just finishing up the Aries, and I will get that ready to go, and that'll wrap up this this awesome build. So all right, thanks a lot. All right, so here's some footage of the interior. I didn't get any video of that prior to putting it together. So there are the finished painted seats, and I did make some little steps that I put in, as you can see, just some minimal things. And here's how it looks on the inside. Now, I'd originally planned to have the top removable so you could see inside and see that. And I also worked on the ceiling. So here's the lights going on to the top of the ceiling parts that I talked about earlier. And I got that all completed, and it was all working just great. But then the night before the convention, I finally got it all together, and it was a pretty tight fit for that ceiling part to go in, and something shorted out and it just stopped working. So I spent several hours working late into the night, tearing it back apart, getting it to work. I had to run 2 different wires down through to get it. You can see how close of a space it is. Finally got it working. It's not exactly how I want it to be. At some point in the future, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take it back out and redo it. I want it to be more on the cool white side than it is. It's a little too much warm white, but it looks pretty good. It looks great on the kit, or on the big base. There's the cockpit. So let me show you a few pictures of it at the convention here, and then I'm going to show you a short little video that I took at the convention showing the whole kit together. So there it is on the table, looking pretty sweet with the ship on it. There's a nice 45-degree side angle. See the pod in the landing position. There's a close-up of the pod there. Those are the lights in the convention hall. All right, let's take a look at the video from the actual show. All right, so I thought I'd get some good shots of the completed model here at the convention, the IPMS swap meet model contest. There's the cockpit, little guys in it. As I said, the passenger section's too bright, but it's pretty cool. Definitely gives it a nice full scale to it. And there's the ship at the 45-degree angle. So my moon buses, of course, pretty sweet. Teeny astronauts. This little guy directing the crane picking up the wrecked moon bus. Alright, there it is from the top with the landing lights. And my little observation rooms.
Huh? On these, I know how long.
All right, and there is my Clavius model diorama up on my shelves in the middle, right next to my other larger, obviously, Aries 1B. Barely got it in there. It was just right down to the bare inch. So let me go ahead and get a little closer. So. And it's cool too because it's up high, so you can see it at this angle if you want to and get kind of the image that you get from the film. Sort of at a, like I said, a 45-degree angle. You can see the lit observation rooms in there. You can see the lights on the little Aries. You can see it in space if I move up a little bit. The Discovery in the background. Hold on, let me get up on top and I'll show you a shot from above. All right, there we go. So there's the cockpit. Now, as I said earlier, I'm not done with the interior. Sorry, try to get it closer on shaky. And I think I'm going to get away from the warm whites when I redo those lights in there at some point in the future before Wonderfest next year. But still looks pretty sweet. Get that to focus. Come on. Okay. And yes, my moon buses. Everybody survived my trip down to the convention. So there's my little astronauts. One up there. Okay. All right, so very happy with how this turned out. Looks really cool. Really nice up on my display. All right, so it really turned out fantastic. Now, the convention I went to, it was a much smaller one. It was even smaller than the one I go to in Indianapolis. A little bit smaller, I think. So it wasn't bad. It was nice to go there and enter my model there. And I just took the this one here. I didn't take any other ones because I was literally working till really late in the night to finish up the wiring that failed. And real close to just giving up and taking it without it lighting up. But I persevered. I was up till probably about 2 in the morning, 1 or 2 in the morning. And then got up and left at got up at 5:30 in the morning so I could leave at 6 and get down there about 9. But it all worked out in the end. So it did light up. It looks really good. It looks great. I do want to go back, as I said, and revisit the interior for the passenger section and get those lights to work better and redo them. It's just such a tight space in there that there's really no room to work. And when you're pushing things in, you're more prone to getting some some shorts in the wiring, but I'm happy the way it turned out. I did not win any awards, so I'm just going to say, I'm not going to say too much more, but I'm only going to say I've reached the point as far as awards are concerned that they have no bearing on the quality of my models. They really don't. Quite honestly, it's one or two people that are judging my particular one or the other ones in my category, and not that they're bad or anything. The ones that did win were quite nice and quite well done. I even was able to talk to another modeler by the name of Trevor, who had 2 entries that won in the same category. Fantastic job, did a really great job of scratch building some ships that he did on his own. So we got to talk and just, talking about our work, which is always great. That's the part that I really enjoy. That's what I love about the conventions, is meeting up with fellow modelers, talking about my work, talking about their work, exchanging ideas. That's the best part. And it's the modelers, the modeling community that I respect and that has a real view of my work and what I do. And it never fails for them to give me fantastic compliments and how wonderful it is. So I know the quality of my work. I don't need an award to tell me that I've done a great job. And it's not that's not what they're about anyway. So if I get awards, that's great. If I don't, that's great. It doesn't matter. I would much rather spend the time, working with other modelers in the community and people that really appreciate what I put into it, and I appreciate what they put into theirs as well. So, all right. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. Really happy with how it looks up on my display. If you can see that, I can't tell if it's in frame or not, but really happy with it. So, so thanks to all my subscribers. Thanks to everyone on Facebook and Instagram who appreciate the pictures and everything that I put down. And stay tuned. I will be returning to my commission build of the pod from 2001, working on 2 of those concurrently. So I'm going to be doing my next videos on those once I get some of that footage completed as well. And then we'll see about any other projects that I will be starting here in the near future. All right. Well, thank you very much, and I will see you the next time.